December 20th, 1943, 13:47 hours, 27,000 feet above Bremen, Germany. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, pilot of B-17G Olde Pub, felt his aircraft shudder as German flak found its mark. The explosion wasn't close. It was direct. Shrapnel tore through the right wing, punctured fuel tanks, severed hydraulic lines. The No. 3 engine caught fire immediately. Black smoke poured from the cowling. Brown hit the fire suppression system. Nothing happened. The system was destroyed. He feathered the propeller, shut off fuel to the engine. The fire continued burning, consuming oil lines, threatening to spread to the wing fuel tanks. If the fire reached the tanks, the wing would explode. The aircraft would disintegrate. 10 men would die in seconds. Brown's co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Spencer "Pinky" Luke, was already working the problem, adjusting power on the remaining 3 engines, compensating for the asymmetric thrust, maintaining altitude, keeping the bomber steady enough for the bombardier to complete his run. Because they were still over the target, still had a mission, still had bombs to drop. The crew of Olde Pub had flown from England that morning with the 379th Bomb Group, part of a 300-bomber raid on Bremen, industrial targets, U-boat construction facilities, ball bearing factories. Strategic bombing meant to cripple German war production. But German air defenses had other plans. Flak batteries had opened fire as the formation approached. Fighters had attacked during the bomb run. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Focke-Wulf FW-190s, dozens of them, tearing into the bomber formation. Olde Pub had been hit 3 times before the No. 3 engine fire, once in the nose, bombardier's position. Lieutenant Al Sadok, wounded but functional. Once in the waist, both waist gunners hit by fragments, still at their guns, still firing. And once in the tail. Staff Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, tail gunner, hadn't responded to intercom calls since that hit. Might be wounded, might be dead, might be unconscious. No way to know. The tail section was isolated. No way to reach it in flight. Eckenrode was alone back there, alive or dead. The crew wouldn't know until they landed. Charlie Brown was 21 years old, from Weston, West Virginia, enlisted in 1941, flight school graduate, commissioned officer. This was his first combat mission as aircraft commander. First mission where he was responsible for 9 other lives. First mission where his decisions meant life or death for his crew. And the decisions were getting harder by the second. The No. 3 engine fire was spreading, flames visible now outside the cowling, licking toward the wing root, temperature gauges climbing, 150 degrees, 175, 200, critical. The wing structure would fail at 250 degrees. They had maybe 3 minutes before structural collapse. Brown checked altitude, 27,000 feet. Checked position, still over Bremen, still over one of the most heavily defended cities in Germany, still surrounded by flak and fighters. He had 3 options. Option 1, maintain course, complete bomb run, drop ordnance on target, stay with formation, hope the fire extinguished itself or the wing held long enough to reach friendly territory. Probability of success, low. The fire was spreading. The wing would fail. Option 2, abort bomb run, turn away from target, jettison bombs, head for England immediately. Give the aircraft maximum chance of survival by reducing exposure time. But abandoning the mission meant the target wasn't hit, meant German war production continued unaffected, meant the mission was failure. Option 3, complete the bomb run despite the fire. Drop bombs on target, then deal with the consequences. Risk the wing, risk the crew, but accomplish the mission. Brown chose option 3, didn't hesitate, didn't second guess, just keyed the intercom. "Bombardier, you have 30 seconds to target. Make them count." Sadok acknowledged, blood running from a cut on his forehead, vision partially obscured. But he could see the target, could see the bomb site, could complete the drop. 20 seconds. 15. 10. Bombs away! 2 tons of high explosive dropped from the bomb bay. The B-17 lurched upward, suddenly lighter, more maneuverable. Brown banked left, hard turn away from the target, away from Bremen, toward the North Sea, toward England, toward home. The number 3 engine fire extinguished, starved of fuel, cooled by airflow from the turn. But the engine was destroyed. Propeller feathered, no thrust. 3 engines remaining. Number 4 engine, the far right, was running rough. Cylinder temperature elevated. Oil pressure fluctuating. Damaged by the same flak burst that destroyed number 3. It was operating but degrading. Might fail completely at any moment. Number 1 and number 2 engines, both on the left wing, were running normally, for now. But they were working harder, compensating for the lost power on the right. Overheating slowly. Not critical yet, but trending toward critical. Brown calculated. 3 engines, 1 failing. 400 miles to England. Current speed, 190 miles per hour. Flight time, 2 hours, 5 minutes. Could the engines last 2 hours? Could the damaged airframe hold together? Could they avoid fighters during the return flight when they were slow, damaged, and unable to keep up with the formation? The formation was already gone. Pulled ahead during the turn away from target. Ye Olde Pub was alone now. Straggler. Wounded bomber limping home. Easy target for any German fighter that found them. Brown descended, trading altitude for speed. 25,000 feet, 20,000, 15,000. Lower altitude meant denser air, more oxygen for the engines, better performance, but also meant more exposure to ground fire. Meant flying through flak zones instead of over them. Risk versus reward. Brown chose reward. Needed speed more than altitude. At 12,000 feet, he leveled off. Speed increased to 210 miles per hour. Better. Still slow compared to healthy B-17s cruising at 250, but better than 190. Luke monitored the instruments, called out problems as they developed. Number 4, oil pressure dropping. 40 psi. 35. 30. How long until failure? 10 minutes, maybe 15. Can we make it to the coast? If we're lucky. They weren't lucky. At 14:02, 15 minutes after leaving Bremen, German fighters found them. 2 Bf-109s, diving from the sun, standard attack profile. Brown saw them too late. No time to evade, no altitude to dive, no speed to run. Only defense was the gunners. Fighters, 4 o'clock high. The top turret gunner, Staff Sergeant Bertie Coulombe, swung his twin .50 calibers. Fired. Tracers arced toward the diving fighters. Missed. The 109s were too fast. Closed too quickly. They opened fire at 600 yards. 20mm cannon shells. 7.92mm machine gun rounds. Walked toward the B-17. Struck the right wing, the fuselage, the tail. One round penetrated the co-pilot's compartment. Missed Luke by inches. Struck the instrument panel. Destroyed the airspeed indicator, the altimeter, the artificial horizon. Half the flight instruments went dark. Luke called it out. Instruments dead, were flying visual. Brown acknowledged. Didn't matter. He could feel the aircraft. Could sense speed from engine sound. Could judge altitude from air pressure. Instruments helped, but weren't essential. Not yet. The 109s pulled up, climbed for another pass. Brown turned into them. Standard defensive maneuver. Make them attack head-on instead of from behind. Head-on passes gave fighters less time to aim, less time to fire, higher risk of collision that made them hesitant. The 109s accepted the challenge, came straight in, both firing. Brown and Luke fired back. The B-17's nose guns, two .50 calibers operated by the bombardier. Sadok pressed the triggers, fired until the guns were empty. The 109s passed, one on each side, 30 feet of separation. Close enough to see the German pilots' faces, close enough to see their expressions. Concentration, determination, professional respect for crew that kept fighting despite overwhelming damage. The 109s climbed again. Brown expected them to make another pass. They didn't. They waggled their wings. Salute. Recognition that the B-17 crew had earned respect. Then they turned away. Left. Gone. Brown didn't understand. German fighters didn't just leave, didn't salute and withdraw, didn't show mercy to damaged bombers. They pressed attacks until the target was destroyed or they ran out of ammunition. Why had these two left? Luke had the answer. Check 6 o'clock. Brown looked back, saw another fighter. Single aircraft, staying back, not attacking, just following, watching. It was a Bf-109, gray-green camouflage, yellow nose marking indicating experienced pilot. It maintained position 500 yards behind, close enough to attack, close enough to finish them. But it wasn't attacking, just following. Brown watched it through the rearview mirror mounted above his position. The 109 stayed there, following, not threatening, just present. 5 minutes passed. 10. The 109 didn't attack, didn't close, didn't shoot, just flew formation with the crippled bomber. Brown called to the tail. Ecke, you see that 109? No response. Ecke hadn't responded to any calls since the flak hit over Bremen. Brown tried again. Eckenrode, if you can hear me, acknowledge. Silence. The intercom line to the tail was either cut or Ecke couldn't respond. Wounded, unconscious, dead. Brown didn't know, couldn't know. The crew had discussed it. If Ecke was dead, they could bail out, save themselves. If he was unconscious, they could still bail out. He wouldn't know, wouldn't suffer, wouldn't feel fear. But if he was wounded and conscious, unable to respond but aware, abandoning him meant leaving him to die alone. Trapped in the tail section, unable to escape, unable to bail out, watching his crew leave, knowing he'd been left behind. Brown had made his decision already, made it the moment they'd discussed it. We're not bailing out, not without knowing Ecke's status. We stay with the aircraft. We all land together, or we all go down together. The crew had agreed, every man, even knowing the aircraft was critically damaged, even knowing they might not make it. They agreed because that's what crews did. You didn't abandon your brothers. You didn't leave anyone behind. You brought everyone home, or you didn't go home at all. At 14:35, the number 4 engine failed completely. Oil pressure 0. Temperature 400 degrees. The engine seized, froze. Propeller windmilling because the feathering mechanism had failed, creating drag, slowing the aircraft. Speed dropped to 180 miles per hour, then 170. The B-17 was barely flying. 2 engines remaining, both overworked, both overheating. Number 1 engine temperature, 320 degrees. Red line was 350. Number 2 engine temperature, 310 degrees, also approaching red line. Brown did the math again. Current position, 120 miles from English coast. Current speed, 170 miles per hour. Time to coast, 42 minutes. Temperature rise rate, 5 degrees every 2 minutes. In 42 minutes, both engines would be at 450 degrees. Far beyond red line, far into failure zone. They wouldn't make it. Not at this speed, not with these temperatures. Brown pushed the throttles forward, increased power. Temperature rose faster. 330 degrees on number 1, 320 on number 2. Speed increased to 185. Better. Still not enough. He pushed further. Emergency military power. Maximum output. The engines screamed, protested. Temperature spiked. 350 degrees, 360. The manual said engine failure was imminent above 350. They were at 360, climbing, 370, 380. But speed was now 200 miles per hour. Coast in 36 minutes instead of 42. 6 minutes saved. Might be enough. Might not. The Bf-109 was still following, still 500 yards back, still not attacking. Brown watched it. Couldn't understand. Why follow but not attack? Why stay with them? Why show that strange professional courtesy? Then the 109 moved, pulled alongside, flew formation off the left wing, 50 feet away. The pilot was visible clearly now, young, maybe 25, blonde hair, looking across at the B-17, making eye contact with Brown. The German pilot pointed down, then pointed ahead. Message clear. Land. You won't make it to England. Land in Germany. Survive. Brown shook his head, pointed toward England. Message equally clear. We're going home. The German pilot nodded, understood, saluted. A formal military salute. Respect between warriors. Then he peeled away. Dove. Gone. Brown never saw him again. At 15:02, they crossed the German coast. Over the North Sea now, England 100 miles ahead. Both engines at 400 degrees, far beyond any safe operating temperature. Metal fatigue was destroying the internal components, pistons, valves, cylinder walls. The engines wouldn't last much longer. Couldn't last much longer. But they were running, still producing power, still pushing the bomber toward home. Luke called out new problems. Hydraulic pressure 0. Landing gear will be manual. Flaps? Manual, if we're lucky. Brakes? Probably nothing. Brown absorbed the information. No hydraulics meant no powered landing gear extension. The gear would have to be cranked down manually. Laborious process. Required crew members to leave their positions, operate hand cranks, lower the gear through mechanical advantage rather than hydraulic power. Flaps would be the same. Manual extension if they worked at all. And brakes might not function. Might have to land and let the aircraft roll until friction stopped it. Or until it hit something. Neither option was ideal, but both were better than crashing. At 15:28, they reached the English coast. Cornwall. Beautiful green coastline. Home. Safety. Sanctuary. Both engines were at 420 degrees. Temperature gauges pegged at maximum. No idea how hot the engines actually were. Just that they were beyond anything Boeing had ever tested. Beyond anything any pilot had ever experienced. The engines should have failed already. Should have seized. Should have caught fire. But they kept running. As if they understood that stopping now meant death. That they had to keep pushing. Keep fighting. Keep running until the aircraft was safely on the ground. Brown descended, found the nearest airfield, RAF St. Mawgan. Small field, short runway. But it was there. It was available. It was enough. He called the tower. St. Mawgan Tower, this is Army 243, B-17, emergency landing. 3 engines failed. Hydraulics failed. Possible casualties. Request immediate clearance. The tower responded instantly. 243, you are cleared to land any runway. Emergency equipment standing by. Brown lined up for final approach. 2 miles from the runway. Altitude 1,000 feet. Speed 140 miles per hour. Minimum controllable speed for B-17 with 2 engines. Any slower and they'd stall. Luke and 2 crew members cranked the landing gear down manually. 400 rotations of the crank wheel, each rotation lowering the gear 1 inch. Muscles burning, sweat pouring despite the cold. They got the gear down. 3 green lights, locked. The flaps wouldn't extend. Manual system failed. They'd land without flaps. Faster than normal, longer rollout, but manageable. 1 mile from runway, 500 feet altitude. Speed 150 miles per hour. Number 1 engine temperature unknown. Gauge beyond maximum. Number 2 engine temperature unknown. Gauge beyond maximum. Both engines producing power through sheer mechanical stubbornness. Half a mile. 200 feet. Brown could see the runway clearly. Concrete. Solid. Real. They were going to make it. At 100 feet, number 2 engine failed. Catastrophic failure. Internal components disintegrated. The engine tore itself apart. Metal fragments shot through the cowling. The propeller separated from the crankshaft, flew off, tumbled toward the ground. The B-17 yawed left. Asymmetric thrust from number 1 engine. Brown compensated with rudder. Full right rudder. Held the aircraft straight. Number 1 engine was all they had. Single engine. 430 degrees. Beyond any possible safe limit. But still running. Still pushing. 50 feet. Brown cut power. Flared. The main wheels touched. Hard landing. No flaps meant high speed. The bomber bounced. Came down again. Stayed down. Rolled. No brakes. Brown used differential engine power. Bursts of throttle to steer. The B-17 rolled 2,000 feet. 3,000. The runway was 6,000 feet long. They had space. Plenty of space. The aircraft rolled slower. 4,000 feet. 3,000 feet remaining. 2,000. Slower still. 1,000 feet remaining. Rolling at 20 miles per hour. 500 feet remaining. 10 miles per hour. The B-17 stopped. 300 feet from the end of the runway. Stopped. Silent. Engines dead. Systems dead. But on the ground, intact. Survivable. Brown shut down all systems. Sat without moving for 30 seconds. Processing. They'd survived. Against every probability. Against every calculation. 3 engines failed. Hydraulics failed. Instruments destroyed. They'd survived. Luke looked at him. "We need to check Ecke." Brown nodded. Unstrapped. Climbed out of his seat. The crew was already moving toward the tail. Through the bomb bay. Through the waist section. To the tail compartment. The tail gunner's position. They found Ecke unconscious. Slumped in his seat. Blood on his flight suit. Wounds from flak fragments. But alive. Breathing. Pulse strong. He'd been unconscious since Bremen. Since the flak hit. Hadn't heard any of the intercom calls. Hadn't known about the fighters, the engine failures, the emergency landing. Had been unconscious through everything. Was waking now. Groggy. Confused. Seeing his crew standing around him. "Did we make it?" Brown smiled. "We made it. We all made it." Ecke closed his eyes, relaxed. "Good. I knew you wouldn't leave me." "Never. We don't leave anyone behind." The medical personnel arrived, evacuated Eki to the base hospital. Shrapnel wounds, concussion, nothing life-threatening. He'd recover fully. The rest of the crew was examined. Sadok needed stitches for the forehead cut. The waist gunners had minor fragment wounds. Everyone else was physically intact. Exhausted, traumatized, but intact. The aircraft was examined. The damage report was extensive. Number 3 engine destroyed by fire. Number 4 engine seized completely. Number 2 engine disintegrated. Number 1 engine damaged beyond repair. Right wing structure weakened by fire. Fuselage punctured in 14 locations. Tail section damaged by flak. Hydraulic system destroyed. Half the flight instruments destroyed. The engineering officer's assessment: this aircraft should not have flown, should not have made it back, should not have landed successfully. That it did defies mechanical logic. The only explanation is exceptional piloting and sheer luck. Charlie Brown was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation mentioned extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight and heroism and exceptional flying skill. It didn't mention that he'd refused to bail out. Didn't mention that he'd stayed with a crippled aircraft rather than abandon an unconscious crew member. Didn't mention that he'd flown 2 hours on failing engines rather than take the safe option. The citation couldn't capture that. Couldn't describe the decision to stay, to risk death rather than leave someone behind. That decision wasn't policy, wasn't procedure, was just basic humanity. Was understanding that crew meant family, that you don't abandon family, that bringing everyone home matters more than individual survival. Brown never spoke publicly about the flight until 1990, 47 years later. A German fighter pilot named Franz Stigler contacted him, said he'd been flying the Bf-109 that day, said he'd followed the B-17, said he couldn't bring himself to shoot down a crippled bomber, said he'd escorted them to the coast instead, protected them from other fighters, made sure they reached safety. Brown and Stigler met, became friends, spoke at aviation events together, told their story. The story of enemies who showed each other mercy, who recognized shared humanity despite being on opposite sides, who proved that even in war, honor exists. The story became famous, books written, documentaries made. But the part that mattered most to Brown wasn't the German escort, wasn't the miraculous survival, was the decision to stay with Eki, to refuse to abandon him, to risk everything rather than leave anyone behind. That was the story he told. That was the lesson he wanted remembered. Crews are families. You don't leave family. You bring everyone home, every time, no matter the cost. That's not heroism. That's just what you do. Hugh Eckenrode lived until 2003, 59 years after the mission. He never forgot that his crew stayed. Never forgot that Brown refused to bail out. Never forgot that 9 men risked death rather than leave him behind. He said it simply: I knew they wouldn't leave. That's what made us a crew. Not training, not orders. Trust. Knowing that no matter what happened, we'd all go home together, or none of us would. December 20th, 1943, they proved it. They stayed. We all made it home. Together. Ye Olde Pub was repaired. Returned to service. Flew 29 more missions with different crews. Survived the war. Was eventually scrapped in 1946. But the story survived. The story of a crew that refused to abandon a wounded brother, that flew a dying aircraft 200 miles rather than bail out, that landed with 1 engine when 4 were required, that proved loyalty meant more than survival, that proved brotherhood was real, not sentiment, Not propaganda, but actual commitment to bring everyone home. December 20th, 1943. B-17G, Ye Olde Pub. Charlie Brown and his crew. 3 engines failed. 1 unconscious crew member in the tail. 1 decision to stay. 1 impossible flight home. 1 landing that shouldn't have been possible. 10 men who survived because 9 refused to leave 1 behind. That's the story. That's the brotherhood. That's what it meant to be a bomber crew. Not just flying together, but refusing to let anyone fly alone. Refusing to let anyone die alone. Refusing to accept that anyone would be left behind, ever, for any reason. That was the promise every crew made. Most kept it. Brown's crew kept it when keeping it seemed impossible. When keeping it meant risking everything. They kept it anyway. Because that's what crews did. That's what brothers did. That's what made them more than soldiers. Made them family. Made them legendary. Made their story worth remembering 79 years later. Not because they were heroes, but because they were human. Because they proved that humanity survives even in war. Even when everything else fails. Even when engines die and aircraft fall apart and death seems certain. Humanity survives. Loyalty survives. Brotherhood survives. And sometimes, through sheer refusal to give up, through absolute commitment to bring everyone home, impossible becomes possible. 3 dead engines become 1 working engine. 1 working engine becomes safe landing. Safe landing becomes everyone walking away. Everyone alive. Everyone home. Together. Just like they promised. Just like it should be. Always.